My name is Spencer. I am a water efficiency specialist with Northern Water. I am on the water efficiency team, and we have a series of programs that you or your business, your church, your school, even your HOA might be able to take advantage of. So I'm just going to do a little recap on some of that stuff, and then we'll get into the good stuff. So first off, who is Northern Water? Who are we? What do we do? So we are a regional transcontinental water provider. So we provide supplemental water to all the municipalities on the Front Range, everywhere from Fort Collins down to Broomfield and Boulder, and then following out the South Platte all the way to Julesburg. So we do manage and operate the Colorado Big Thompson project, which brings water under the Continental Divide through the Alma Adams Tunnel into some of the reservoirs you might know along the Front Range, like Horsetooth and Pinewood, Carter Lake, Boulder Reservoir. That's where all that water gets stored. And so it is comprised of about 33 cities, 29 districts, and 6 industrial districts as well, which comes out to just under 1 million people and about 1.5 million acres. So quite a bit of water being delivered from the West Slope. So we do have an efficiency program here at Northern Water. That's where Lindsay and myself spend most of our time. Lindsay Nerad here is on the call as well. She'll be hopping into the SLT conversation here in a bit. At the top left, you can see we do have a conservation garden on campus in Berthoud. If you ever want to come visit, you can come visit it in normal business hours and on the weekends. We're usually there during the week as well. If you ever want a free tour, we're happy to walk you around, show you all the cool plants. It's just a lot of low water alternatives to bluegrass and other, really thirsty plant material. So we like to show off a lot of native stuff. We like to show off a lot of warm season grasses, native grasses, good trees, perennials, and plants and such. So if you ever want to come check it out, let us know. We'd love to come. We'd love to show you around. We also host a series of consultation and audit programs. We have 2 outdoor audit programs, one of which is with Resource Central. They support our commercial outdoor audit for a lot of our HOAs and businesses that request these services. Whenever we just need a really comprehensive overview of what the irrigation scheduling might look like and what their general water use is, this is where we like to partner with Resource Central and get those services out there. We do have an advanced audit program when we get into some bigger systems where maybe it's a lot of acreage or we have pumps and ponds, reclaimed water source. It gets a little bit messy. We like to bring in an engineer and they'll do an advanced audit. And we also perform landscape consultations. So myself and another Lindsay, we do have 2 Lindsays on our team. And the other Lindsay Lucia, we will come out and perform a landscape consultation, kind of talk about some strategies that you can use to kind of lower your water bill and look at some low water alternative landscape options. We have a series of fact sheets and tools on the website as well. We have everything from, access to a native grass guide to, how should I program my sprinkler controller so that I don't water too much with my new low water plants, and just about everything in between. We also have a nice, fun water savings calculator. That's a really valuable tool that we like to share, kind of shows people, what you can do to save some water if you want to pursue a landscape conversion. We do have a grant program. I'll talk about that more here in a sec, but that is the backbone of our program. We're very proud of where it's come, and a lot of cool things are coming up as well. We also host a lot of trainings. So we just hosted some Irrigation Association classes. We like to partner with Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado to host sustainable landscape management as well. And there's just a few other programs that we've been participating in over the years. And lastly, we also have our weather network. So throughout our entire service area, we have 20+ weather stations giving real-time data. So if you're a data nerd like myself and you love looking at this stuff, it gives you everything you could possibly need weather-wise and more. So for our consultations, HOAs are kind of our primary participants for this program. Like I said, myself and Lindsay Lucia will come out to your site. This is all free of charge, by the way. We don't take payment for this. We'll come out to your site. We'll after submitting an intake form, that is the first step. So your organization will have to submit an intake form, kind of looking at and identifying some of the areas that might be a bit of a headache. Maybe there's high maintenance costs, maybe it's high water use, maybe it's just a really challenging area you're having a hard time growing the appropriate plants in. All of this focused around a water savings perspective. We'll receive the intake form and we'll get scheduled. We like to run through the summer. Typically we start in June and late August, early September, depending on our demand. And then we'll come out and we'll walk the site with you. We'll look at everything. You can pick my brain. You can pick Lindsay Lucia's brain as well. She is a plant expert. I myself, irrigation. So between the two of us, we're pretty dangerous. But we can talk to you just about anything that needs to happen to kind of get to your low water use, water savings goals. And after that, we will send a follow-up report. And this is what I think is the most valuable of the consultation. This is where we send a report that has all the resources that we talked about. So it's going to tell you, it's going to give you access to some plant lists. It's going to tell you how to find a good landscape designer, a good landscape contractor, maybe some of the fact sheets that I mentioned earlier. It'll give you access to those. It's just going to kind of give you a good solid document to point you in the right direction and keep you going that way. So in 2023, we did complete 47, which was great. And since 2018, which is the inception of the program, we've completed a total of 205. And all of this is the prerequisite to applying for the grant. And for the grant, this is a maximum award of $20,000. It is a dollar for dollar match. So if there's a $40,000 project, this would be split down the middle, Northern Water for $20,000, your organization for the other. Anything else would be on you. And this is where we want to help with these conversions. We want to see some water savings. A lot of the times we're targeting these high water use bluegrass areas and trying to find an alternative. And, we have a couple requirements, like, it's got to be at least 1,000 square feet and 50% plant coverage. And we have to show some water savings. The reason we do the plant coverage requirement is because we don't want a world of rocks and cactus. We want to see some pretty flowers like here on the right. So, we want to show people that there are ways to save water and have an efficient and beautiful looking landscape at the same time. So this program really encompasses that. We also do support irrigation upgrades. Last year we did a couple controllers, and that was the whole project for an HOA. And they were able to prove and demonstrate that these controllers were going to save them some water. And obviously they're not the prettiest looking things like these flowers are, but they do a lot of work in saving water. So we do like to kind of, and we see a lot of combination of the projects too. We see a lot of low water landscapes combined with some irrigation upgrades as well. So that's it for our program. We're going to talk about a project that Lindsay and myself took part in here very recently in support of the Marshall Fire. But if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. This is my email right here. We'll have Lindsay's email up here in a little bit, but that's all I have for this. So Lindsay, if you're ready to get rolling, I would love to start sharing the sustainable landscape templates with everybody.
Okay, sounds good. So I think we wanted to start with maybe 2 of the poll questions now. Do you want to put those up? There we go.
We have just another minute on this one, and then I'll launch the second one.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, looks like I can actually launch them. There we go. All right. And Lindsay, can you see those results?
Oh, I don't.
Nope. Okay.
I don't think so, but
I can.
I'm not sure how.
Yeah.
How to do that.
No, that's okay. I'll just say it. So let me turn my camera on. So for, have you looked through the templates prior to this webinar? It looks like 31% yes and 69% no. And for our other question, how did you hear about the sustainable landscape templates? Local news, 18%, Northern Water News, 31%, word of mouth, 31%, and other Marshall Fire recovery resources, 19%.
Okay, great. Well, that's good. I'm actually glad that a lot of folks haven't looked at them yet, because that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take a look and we're gonna kind of run through everything. We're gonna start with some background, and let me share my screen here and make sure, let's see. Wow, apparently I have a lot of screens. Okay, how's that look for everybody? Is that good?
Good.
Okay, great. All right, so yeah, I will start us out with talking about the sustainable landscape templates. And as you can see, my name is Lindsay Nerad. I work with Spencer in the water efficiency department. There's my email. Feel free to take that. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me after this. So let's see. Okay, so I'm sure that everybody here has heard of the Marshall Fire. And so that's kind of how all of this got started. You know, the Marshall Fire happened in December of 2021, and it destroyed 1,084 structures and, you know, left many folks without their homes. So that sort of prompted what led to what we're about to talk about, which is the sustainable landscape templates. So to give you some background, the way this sort of all came about is that Northern Water was approached by a community member and asked if we could produce something that was similar to what Sonoma Marin in California had produced. So they produced 8 landscape templates that consisted of front yard designs and then conceptual whole yard designs. So that's kind of what you see on the right there, is kind of a conceptual whole yard design. And then, oops, sorry. Unfortunately, at the time, we were a little bit short-staffed. So we weren't able to take this on right away, but I was hired, and then not a whole lot of time after that, Spencer was hired. So that sort of enabled us to think about undertaking this landscape template idea. And so we had a stakeholder group that we also like to call them a advisory group, because they really are sort of the brains behind this endeavor and really helped guide the process. And so you can see here, these are some of the folks that took part. So we had 3 community members, and they were part of the Louisville Neighborhood Preparedness Roundtable. The City of Louisville, the Sustainability Manager and Sustainability Specialist took part. Town of Superior, we had a Planning and Building Director that took part, and the Sustainability Manager also took part. City of County of Boulder, we had the Boulder Fire Rescue, Wildfire Partners, and a Commercial Horticultural Specialist that was actually also with the CSU Extension. And then a nonprofit, the Boulder Watershed Collective, also took part in the stakeholder process. And so kind of to give you a rough timeline on how that happened. So January, we sort of held our first initial meeting. This was January of 2022. We held that first initial meeting with our advisory group. There were initially a few more folks involved than the list I just mentioned, but kind of it was a long process, and so not everybody was able to stay with us through that whole process. But some of the key takeaways that we had from that first meeting is that it was really important to folks that we use Firewise principles in these designs. It was also important that these designs supported pollinators, and that they manage grade changes and slopes. So we had a lot of sites that had a lot of grade changes in their yard, and they wanted to see those addressed. They wanted options that were cost effective. And let's see. And so in June, we kind of after taking all this, all this information away and going through our kind of lengthy process that we have internally, we released a request for proposals in June, and then we contracted with Norris in August. And then through the process with Norris, we also had 3 additional advisory group or stakeholder meetings to receive feedback from that group. And then the templates were released just last December. So that was very exciting for us. And so here are the templates. This is kind of the final, kind of our nice 3Ds that we like to show everybody. And then so from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over to our website, and I hope this works. So let's see. All right. I think everybody sees the website now. Okay. So I'm going to start you out on our homepage, actually, because I get a lot of questions on how to find the templates. So I want to start you out right here. This is just northernwater.org. So very easy to remember. And then go to what we do, and then you're going to go down to landscape templates. So then you're going to see 2 different types of landscape templates, and these are the sustainable landscape templates. So you go ahead and go to learn more. And then as you can see here, we have 6 different landscape templates. And so unlike the Sonoma Marin, our landscape templates are actually entire yards. So they're not just front yards, they have, and not just a concept plan for the entire, yard, but a full plan for the entire yard. And so, and these are meant to, these were taken from real lots in the burn area, and are kind of meant to suit a variety of different lot sizes and needs and whatnot. So we have some that are pie-shaped. So the Colorado Contemporary and the Naturalistic, these are both pie-shaped. So that would be like a cul-de-sac type situation. The Colorado Contemporary is a smaller cul-de-sac, and also has substantial grade changes. And then the Naturalistic, we can just open that one real quick. And you can see, so it says here kind of what the features are. So it's a pie-shaped lot with a walkout basement and 14,000 square feet. So this is kind of gives you that 3D of, kind of what, if everything goes right, what it will look like in your landscape. And then this is kind of an overview of the landscape plan. So we have like our lawn and our water needs kind of laid out here. And so we'll go back. And we do have a large lot. So that was something else that was requested by the stakeholder group. This is sort of for the needs of the unincorporated Boulder County area. And we can take a quick look at that. And so you can see this is 45, over 45,000 square feet. So a much larger lot. And then this is kind of the last one I'll show. This is the Waterwise Adaptive. This is modeled after the Sagamore neighborhood. So much smaller than the other ones, just 3,000 square feet. So we don't even, in this option, and there's actually another option that doesn't include any turf in the plan. But of course, all of these are, we like to say they're just kind of suggestions. So these are for you to change and adopt and make your own. So you, of course, could make the patio smaller and put lawn in there, or however you wanted to change that. So go back here and I'll just kind of go through this Colorado Contemporary. They all come with the same tools, the same list of resources. So we won't miss out on anything by just using this plan. And I'll start with the design guide. Up here. So obviously we have a table of contents there, a little bit about the project background. And so I just want to point out that this talks about flex space. So each design has what we call flex space. And these are spaces that are, as they sound like, they're flexible. So you could use these for kids' play area, a fenced dog run, an alternative outdoor storage location, or a vegetable garden or a pollinator garden. We do have a pollinator detail that's included in the resources, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then so in this section, so every plan kind of specifies a type of grass, but of course, again, just a suggestion. So, you know, maybe you really like the plan, or the plan that works best for your site identifies buffalo blue grama mix as the lawn type, but you know, you have kids and a dog, and that's probably not going to work. So you might want to pick something else. You might want to pick the dog tuff grass. So this will kind of give you the key characteristics of each sod type, or seed mix, whichever the turf kind of requires. So that's kind of, these are kind of pros and cons of each type of turf here. And then this one's just primarily for the large lot, the native grass seed mixes. That's kind of more designed for the large area. So we'll look at that a little bit more later. And then planting beds, you know, primarily we're going to use those low water use planting beds. So this is just kind of some points on how you're going to establish those plants, kind of the water use that you'll need. We don't really have any high water use areas. Those are really just going to be your vegetable gardens, or your annual beds. So we don't really have anything specified for that. We definitely are trying to move away from sort of high water use areas, as you can imagine. As you can see, this is irrigation. So I will leave that up to Spencer. He's our irrigation guy. He'll be talking to you about that. And so permitting. Permitting we found is just kind of a moving target. And so we didn't really want to lay out too much in terms of permitting. We really wanted to kind of just give you some basic tips and provide the websites that you need to look up those permitting standards. So if you're kind of looking at any of these things, decks, fences, pergolas, retaining walls, definitely suggest that you check in with your local municipality to kind of see what sort of permits you might need. So this was obviously a big one for the templates, the Fire Smart standards. Let's see. So, you know, first, very important, we have our zones. Zone 1, you don't want to have anything sort of in that first 5 feet from your house. So we really are just looking at rock, fences that, you know, the first 5 feet are just metal. Really staying away from sort of any plant material in that zone. And then in the second zone, you know, we're really paying attention to where our trees are. Our trees, the mature canopy, they need to be 10 feet apart, in addition to 10 feet away from the roof. And we don't want any shrubs under trees. We don't want anything woody. We're really just looking at ground covers. And let's see. So yeah, and then obviously not a lot of homes will have that zone 3, but that's where things get a little bit less stringent. You can see this image here where the trees are a little bit closer together, sort of in that zone 3. You're going to have some pine trees, which we wouldn't recommend in obviously definitely not in zone 1, but probably not in zone 2 either. And then just some other things to note. You probably won't want to use any rock mulches. You're really going to want to use, you won't use any wood mulches. You're definitely going to want to use rock mulch, pea gravel, and those sorts of things that aren't flammable. So if you're really attached to your wood mulch, I would just say make sure that you're surrounding it with some type of hardscape, that you're really just, it's like an island of mulch surrounded by other non-flammable things. But we definitely we use a lot of the squeegee at the garden, and we've been finding a lot of benefits from that. So we usually recommend that squeegee as a mulch. And that's what all of the plans require or suggest, I guess. So this you'll see here is the fence, and that's attached to the house, the 5 feet of non-flammable. So it's not wood here, that's a metal, corrugated metal. And I know that's not the prettiest. There's definitely some different things that you can do. That's kind of just to give you an idea of what that would look like. So this, I don't want to get too much into every detail here because you can definitely look over this on your own time. I mostly just want to outline the things that I think are important. So kind of moving down here, just another thing to note, we by and large, definitely recommend that folks go ahead and get their soil tested, particularly if you were in a burn area. You might have contamination in the soil, and it might really be necessary for you to amend that soil or bring in off-site soil. However, typically we don't recommend tilling or adding a lot of organic compost unless it's for your vegetable gardens or your annual beds or things like that. Our native and low water plants don't really need those type of amendments. They do perfectly fine in our native soils. So we'll move down here. You guys know all about Garden in a Box, I'm assuming, since you're here. But the folks that were affected by the Marshall Fire did get, were eligible for, I believe, 2 of the Garden in a Box for their yard. So when we get into the landscape plan, then I'll show you those, that we have a kind of a space designated for those. So this is, I think, an important feature of the sustainable landscape templates, these plant lists. I think this gives, even if you aren't wanting to use the actual templates themselves, the landscape plans, I think that having this plant list is very valuable. These are all plants that are going to do very well in our area. So it gives you a lot of information about those. On the very left, you'll see the code, and that's what's used in the plan. But then we'll go, goes over to the botanical name, common name, and some other details. And something to note here is the native designation. So I have outlined everything in terms of if it's native to our region, native to Colorado, if it's not a native, or if it's a native-var, which it would be a cultivar of a native plant. So, something that's bred for a specific characteristic. So it wouldn't be the same plant that you would find out in the wild, but is sort of the sibling or cousin of that plant. And then on the very far right, you'll see the flammability rating. And so this is taken from Idaho Firewise. So they have basically set a bunch of plants on fire to see what was flammable. And then they gave it a rating. And so it kind of works a little bit counterintuitive. So the higher the number, the less flammable it is. So the high numbers are kind of what you're looking for. We definitely wanted to make this very pollinator friendly. So you'll definitely see plants on here that aren't in those really high numbers, but we wanted to use our native plants, and some of those were a little bit more flammable. So we really wanted to give folks information about the plants and let them kind of decide for themselves. So if you really wanted that like low flammability plant, that like very just resilient yard in terms of Firewise, then you would look for all the 8s and kind of maybe switch out some plants in your plan according to that. So it sort of starts with trees here, moves down into shrubs, and then we get into perennials, grasses and perennials. Again, a lot of we try to do a lot of Colorado natives to really give that sort of options for pollinator gardens and whatnot. So yeah, and then this is a list of folks that helped us. So we're very appreciative to them. This is kind of the list of the stakeholders that helped us develop this. So I'm going to go back here, and then we'll dive into the plans. See if it wants to open. There we go. Okay. So just a note, it's important that if you are wanting to print out any of these plans, that you print them this section out on 24 by 36 sheets. That will ensure that you're able to read them and that they are to scale. So each one here, as you can see, as it slowly loads, each one has a scale. So it's important if you want to have that to scale that you print it out on a 24 by 36 sheet. So we'll start up here, general landscape notes. So these by and large are notes that you will want your contractor to follow. It's probably a good idea for you to read them as well, just so that you're making sure that your contractor is doing the right thing. I do want to point out that the first one here, that it says that you kind of have the option to downsize plant material. I would actually recommend this. I think by and large, they call for, the plans call for 1 gallons. I think 4-inch pots are perfectly fine. What we find actually is with smaller plant sizes, they tend to establish more quickly. So when you're kind of getting into that gallon, it's like lived so much of its life in that pot, and it's going to take a little bit longer for those roots to establish in the ground when you plant them. So, and of course, they're a little cheaper too. So that's a double benefit for you. And then so moving over to landscape legend. So this is something you will definitely want to take note of. This kind of is it has this code here. You'll see these on the plans, the codes that will sort of call out to what type of turf, if it's still edging, sort of the different characteristics of the plans. And so you see here, it says application. So these are kind of, notes that, you might use a Kentucky bluegrass in a heavy trafficked, area. But then also at the far end of that, we have how many gallons. So you can see our Kentucky bluegrass is using a lot more than our other types of grasses. And then here you will see the kind of, is this a sod? So, our Kentucky bluegrass comes into the sod. This is kind of what you're looking at in terms of the blend. And so where this kind of becomes more important is with our seed mixes. And so if you wanted to do the Buffalo Blue Grama blend, then this is sort of what you're looking at, an 80-20% blend. And then for that large lot one, this is where we get into these seed mixes too. So that's something you'd want to pay attention to if you are working on a large lot. So this is kind of a plant schedule that's a little bit more for the contractor. They don't necessarily need all the pretty pictures. But something to note for you would potentially be this is the low flammability list. So if you really wanted to kind of work on the low flammability side, this might be the list you want to draw from. And then, so here is our landscape plan. This is kind of a general layout, not a lot of specifics here, but you will see that we have the kind of little codes here that tell you what everything is. And you can also see it by how it's colored. So we do have like a little high water area over here. And I think that is called out as a vegetable garden. And the kind of reddish areas here, those are the areas that have been kind of designated as the garden in a box area. So if you are getting those garden in a box, then you are able to kind of have those outlined here. Obviously a suggestion, but sort of easy just to pop them in there. And let's see. So kind of moving on to the actual planting plan. This is where all of your plants are sort of laid out. So I did want to point out just that this plan specifically does have retaining walls. So you might notice that these kind of thin lines here are retaining walls to retain the grade, which was requested of us by the advisory group. And as you can see, if you don't have that garden in a box that you're going to be utilizing, there are plants in here, so you don't necessarily have to come up with that on your own. It is laid out for you. And then so you'll notice that each kind of plant has this little code, and this code is based on the botanical name. And so if you come over here, over to the left-hand corner, all of the different codes are sort of laid out alphabetically with the common name next to it. So it may not seem to make sense when you see like AMCA and then you're like lead plant. Well, what does the AMCA mean? Well, that's based on the botanical name. So just a note on that. So you will have to kind of look at what it is and then come over and over here and kind of see, and then you might want to look at the plant list with the photos and see if you can find a photo of it there to see if you like it. And obviously these sites are not going to be applicable. These plans aren't going to be applicable to every site. You might have, your neighbor might have a huge tree, and there might be some full sun plants in here that aren't going to do well under your neighbor's tree. So you might have to look on that plant list and switch some of these out with something that will do better in the shade. Okay. Oh, and then here's the scale. I just wanted to point that out real quick. So here in the lower right-hand corner is the scale. And so this is, as you can see, 3/16 of an inch equals 1 foot on this plan. So when you print this plan out at that 24 by 36 sheet, which will probably have to go to Office Depot or someplace like that to have it printed. Then when you get your little ruler out, and you can get special rulers, but you can also just use your ruler that you have at home, then 3/16 of an inch will equal 1 foot on the plan. And so kind of lastly here, we can talk a little bit about the details. So some of these details are used on the plans and some of them aren't. Some of them are kind of just an extra that we thought might be handy for people. An example of that might be the rain garden. We don't have any specific rain gardens called out. I know that was something that people were very interested in. But I know Norris felt a little uncomfortable with a rain garden just because of our clay soils expanding and having sort of could potentially affect foundations. So we have to be very careful about where we place those rain gardens. But we did include a detail on that, as well as a detail on rain barrels, which is something else that we didn't necessarily specify in the plans. But something that is in the plans is they call it a cobble swale here. Similarly, could be called a dry creek bed. So you just have some specifications on those here. And again, I think this is going to be a little bit more on the contractor side, but definitely welcome any questions from folks that are wanting to tackle this on their own. And so, just the note here that, planting kind of in this triangle shape tends to kind of give the best design effect, I suppose. But we do have a note here about the low water plants being amended with squeegee in the planting hole and either eliminating or minimizing that compost amendment. They tend to kind of get big and overgrown fast and sometimes die a little bit before their time if they're given too much compost. So I think that does it. We do have the retaining wall details here. Obviously, everybody's grade is going to be a little bit different. So these aren't, there's kind of some measurements given here, but you're probably going to need to work with a contractor to decide exactly how high your wall needs to be, how far down your footer needs to go, and kind of all that stuff. So let's see here. We'll go back. And then quickly, we'll just, I'll hit on the pollinator detail. So this is kind of really just a rough detail. These plants that are specified in here are all native to Colorado, great for pollinators. And you can kind of see it has a little key here of when it blooms, what it might attract. very nice, in my experience, easy to grow plants that are suggested here. And then just some notes. I would probably say, so it says to use a seeded ground cover. I think buffalo grass, maybe mixed with some wild blue. Flax might be a good seed mix for a ground cover. But then the rest of these, we're really using plants that we're buying, those 4-inch pots. So we're not sort of waiting for all of that seed to establish. One note here that I was kind of just noticing as I was going through this is it says 6-inch by 6-inch rock cobble serves as water source. So I think that I feel like that is a little bit under detail, not a lot of detail. I think what they mean is maybe if you put like in a saucer, you put some cobble in there and then you can put water in there, that's really beneficial. So providing some sort of water source, I think basically is what we're getting at. That's really important for pollinator habitat. If that's what we're trying to do. This area in the middle is a bare ground area. And I think this is really just kind of some loose guidelines to get you started. You know, your bare ground area probably doesn't need to be in the middle. It can be wherever, but just the idea that those our native bees really, you know, primarily nest in the ground. So we want to leave some of that space open for them so that they're able to build their little burrows and do their little thing. Yeah, I think that's all I have. So I will turn it over to, I think we're opening up to questions. That's what we're doing.
We can squeeze in a few before we turn it over. We've had a lot of really, really great questions, so we won't be able to get to all of them. Just a reminder to any of you, if we don't get to your question, feel free to reach out to gardeninfo@resourcecentral.org or the emails provided in this presentation and the follow-up materials. Lindsay, that was awesome. It's amazing how much you all have done in such a short amount of time. So we have a few questions here. First, do any of the templates, are they pet safe specifically for backyards, or is that something we would just look plant to plant?
Yeah, we haven't outlined necessarily every plant. So unfortunately, well, because we do have flammability ratings, but we don't necessarily have pet safe ratings for each plant. So I know that the Humane Society has a super comprehensive list on toxic plants for your animals. To my knowledge, I don't think that any of these are toxic. Yeah, I mean, I have a pet and I have a lot of these plants and I haven't had any trouble. But yeah, I would say if you want to double check, just go to the Humane Society. And then of course, in terms of dog friendly, there's the dog tough grass, which is, I wouldn't necessarily say in terms like of it's completely safe to pets, but I guess the bonus feature is that it's resilient to dog urine. So
oh, nice.
If you had a dog in the small space, the dog tough might be a good option for a lawn. So
great. Let's see. Is there a list of like certified contractors or a kind of a beginning point for some folks who are still in that contractor searching phase?
Yeah, so we usually recommend folks visit the Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado, ALCC. They have a site where they list folks that have some certifications, the certification that they offer. And again, if you email me, I'm happy to, if you're not able to find it, I'm happy to point you in that direction. I bet I can also just come up with it too before the end of our discussion and pop it in the chat too.
That would be great. And you mentioned some things can be done yourself, but still talking to contractors to get certain aspects drawn out for your specific space. But if someone doesn't work with a contractor, are these fairly easy to adapt and understand on your own?
Yeah, I think it's kind of how much of it you want to do. Like something like if you're really just like wanting to convert, your front yard, I think that that's something, especially with the help of Resource Central, right? Like you could, call Resource Central to remove your lawn, and then you could get a garden in a box, and then you could follow the landscape plan for the rest of the front yard. So that might be something where you could probably do pretty much everything on your own, because you're just using Resource Central to your benefit, and then you're really kind of just planting plants, bringing in some squeegee, maybe some boulders and things like that. I think when you get into the stuff, obviously, like laying pavers, concrete, retaining walls, I think that stuff just gets a little bit too tricky for homeowners. But I would say planting beds, that's definitely something a homeowner can do on their own.
Okay, great. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Spencer, and we'll get to the rest of the questions at the end. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay. So there are no plants without water. We're going to talk a little bit about the irrigation here, and I'm going to pull up my screen real quick. Alrighty, so on the website, we're going to go with the same plan here. And with the landscape plan and the details and the design guide, everything Lindsay's already talked about before, we also have an irrigation plan right here. So this is going to kind of show you everything that you need to do in order to get water to your plants. Now, you might see this and think this is very overwhelming and it's a lot of words, and it is a lot. However, the goal with these plans is to have something that is detailed and in-depth enough for a contractor to take and do things correctly the right way the first time, so you're not ripping stuff up down the road, but also comprehensive enough that if you are a DIYer, you're a weekend warrior, you want to try and do this stuff yourself, and you can read carefully, you should be very successful doing it yourself. So what I'm going to go over today is just kind of how to absorb these plans and how to use them yourself and be successful as a DIYer or with hiring a contractor. So up here on the first page, we're going to go.
Spencer, I think we just need, I don't think we can see your screen.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
It says my screen share is loading. Hold on.
Okay. And we can see Lindsay's screen. So
Oh, Lindsay, would you unshare, please?
Okay.
All right, let's try that.
Perfect.
Sweet. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We're looking at the plan, right? Okay, yeah.
Looking at the words, yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, so on the left here, we're going to start with our general notes. And for the most part, this part is going to be oriented more towards the contractor. And this is basically a lot of the contractual stuff that your contractor is going to want to see if you're moving forward with the contractor. A lot of this is just saying it's just the basic stuff. It's the contractor's responsible for the labor, the materials, staging, equipment, all that stuff. There are some coordination notes in here to coordinate with other contractors. There are some stuff in here, I would say about 90% of this stuff is fairly DIY friendly, but there's a certain amount that you definitely need a plumber for and something you definitely need an electrician for. So this is just talking a little bit about what the roles that your general contractor would potentially play with other subconsultants. Aside from this, it's also just making sure that they know where all the utilities are and that they're not banging stuff up. A really good resource as a homeowner is 811. It's a free service. You can call them. They're usually pretty quick. I called them the other week and they marked my house up like 2 days later. And they'll tell you and flag where everything is in the ground and give you just a good general idea of where all your utilities are, so that if you start running a trencher around or your shovel, you know some of the areas to avoid and be careful around. There's a couple of other things in here, like installing the backflow preventer. That is something that a plumber is required to do in the state of Colorado. So that is just outlining some of that language. And then the rest of this is just little things that are actually fairly important to understand. Keeping your lines a certain distance away from your wall foundations in case of a leak. That's a very common case of how basements flood, is with broken irrigation lines. Installing your valves in different boxes for access. This is something that is very commonly seen in the commercial level, but it is also a cost savings opportunity for homeowners to, if you're installing a group of valves, to stick them all in one box together. Also, I've been told sometimes that when I speak about irrigation, I don't speak English. So please, if you have questions, use the Q&A and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. There's a couple of other things in here and, you know, talking about your pressure requirements and some other site conditions. But the things that we really like to see here are our watering requirements for our plants. And obviously these are very weather dependent. However, these are the values that we've calculated over historical weather data for the last 10 years. And it's a really good baseline to determine your irrigation schedule. A lot of the times when we put in these low water landscapes, the controller does not get adjusted to account for the new water demand of this plant, and they keep getting watered at, you know, what you might water your bluegrass at. So for example, we were talking about dog tuff earlier. This is a really, really cool ground cover that we've seen replacing some bluegrass, and it needs a whole 1 inch of water per week in the peak season compared to bluegrass, which is 1.75. So almost having your water use already for a warm season grass that can handle dog urine, that's pretty cool stuff. On top of this, typically we love to ask the contractor to provide a seasonal maintenance schedule. This is super, super valuable as a homeowner, especially if you like to do all your own maintenance. It's just something that you can kind of check off throughout the year. Like, okay, it's time to start. Like right now, you got to start thinking about turning your sprinklers on, getting your schedule going. There's usually going to be a couple mid-season checkups on what your schedule is doing, and then thinking about winterization and blowout in the fall towards the winter. So something else that also came out of this project was the maintenance manual, which Lindsay will talk about here in a few minutes. And that is a really, really cool product that we're working on. It's all encompassing of the entire landscape. So not just irrigation, but it will talk about everything else going on outside. So here, this is what this section right here is what your plumber and your electrician are going to want to read. So this is basically coordinating, where's my water coming from? How much water do I have? How much pressure do I have? And how big is that pipe and what material is that pipe? And that's all stuff that you can give to your plumber, and he'll be like, okay, cool, I know exactly where to go. I know exactly what kind of backflow preventer to install off of exactly what kind of pipe, and I know what kind of pressure we're looking for. And if you can get all those things coordinated, really makes things a lot easier. And if there's anything you do not want to DIY on this project, it is your point of connection. Everything else you can probably stumble through if you have to, but this is the one thing I would not mess around with. Down here, we also talk about our controller, the location. Once we get to the layout plans, we'll talk a little bit about where we like to put the clocks. And, you know, typically these are located inside in the garage. The reason we do this is it's accessible from a contractor's perspective. So if you have a maintenance guy over, you can just open the garage door. He doesn't have to come in and out of your house or anything to do it. Sometimes these are exterior mounted. You can get the weatherproof enclosures to do that as well. And something we like to see and require is 120 volts, which is your standard outlet voltage for the most part. That is something that is called out on the plans. And if you are installing a clock on a new build, and it's, you know, maybe somewhere there's a power, you might need an electrician to run an outlet out there. A couple other things like the rain-free sensor. If you have a ladder and a screwdriver, you can hang that thing up. And then talking about minimum pressure requirements, most of these systems are going to need minimum 65 PSI. That is usually not a problem in our neck of the woods. So, but it's always something worth checking before you get started. And then the flow sensor, we're going to get into this here in a little bit, but there is a minimum required flow for that to operate, but that all of that stuff is considered in the designs, and it's just something else for a contractor to check off and make sure that that's operating properly. As many of you know, with your sprinkler systems, there's lots of wires in the ground, and this is kind of talking about how to protect your system in case of electrical surges. It's basically the same thing as plugging in a surge protecting strip for your TV and your speaker, right? There are grounding requirements for controllers, and this is talking about how to do that. There is a great resource, the American Society of Irrigation Consultants, right here. If you really want to get into the weeds, that's a really good resource. Otherwise, just ask your contractor. Most of the time, if it's a wall outlet, you're going to be in good shape. There are some wire sizing requirements that we like to follow. Traditionally, older residential sprinkler systems, their wires are undersized. So using a little bit bigger wires helps maintain the longevity of those valves and open them up a little bit quicker. So we like to spec a little bit bigger wires. They're not that much more expensive, and it's totally worth the avoiding the pain down the road. Let's see, we love to call out the different colors of the wires too. This is also really important if you're installing a new system. Different wires have different purposes. So by coloring them, you can help identify what purpose each wire serves. Otherwise, you might have to do some electrical testing to determine that down the road. So sleeves, this is something that's also pretty cheap if you're doing a new build, and it's super valuable. This is basically a larger pipe carrying a smaller pressurized pipe under a paved surface. And the reason we install these is if that pipe under like your driveway, for example, fails, the sleeve offers a passage for that pipe to be removed without having to dig up your driveway. I've seen it happen. It's not fun, and it's pretty expensive. So this is just talking about the materials of the sleeves, kind of, how you want to install them. They like to extend them 12 inches beyond the paving surface. This is just so they're easier to find. And then this is just talking about what kind of PVC, how to size them. Typically, we like to do twice the diameter of the pipe passing through. Tends to give plenty of wiggle room. And then here we have existing tree notes. This is also really important if you have, maybe you're only doing part of your yard, and you've got this, you've got a big elm in the backyard and you're worried about hurting the roots. This is going to be your resource on determining, okay, if the roots are larger than 2 inch, then I need to protect them this way. Talk about some different excavation methods on how to work around them and protect the health of the tree while still getting your irrigation situated. So here on the far right, this is our schedule. So this is going to tell you the products that we recommend be used for a residential system in Colorado. I've done a lot of residential maintenance myself. I stand behind all of these products, and all of them that are applicable are WaterSense certified by the EPA. So these are promoted products as well. And as you can see in the schedule, the way this works is we have our symbol over here, and with that symbol, we have an associated description and the actual model number on the right. So working from left to right, you got symbol, description, product. We will see these symbols down in the layout here in just a second. Actually, I'm going to scoot up there right now because we have the legend on the same sheet. And so what we can do is we can look at this legend. For example, this is a really good zone right here, A3. So we can say, I don't know what this thing is right there. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to look and say, okay, that's my turf valve assembly. That's what's going to let water into my zone and let my sprinklers pop up. So that can tell me, okay, I need to go to Rainbird. I need to buy a 100 DV, and it's going to be a 1 inch, which we can see up here. And then I'm going to move forward to my next line. So now I've got this black line right here, and I'm like, I'm not sure what this means. So I go down here. This is my PVC turf lateral right here. This is going to be class 200 PVC, and it's going to be 1 inch unless it's noted otherwise. In this case, it's noted as 1 inch, so we know to go buy 1 inch PVC. From here, all of this piping is schematic. So if you see bends and angles and stuff, it's just how it's drawn. It's not necessarily how it has to be installed. The order of which the heads are installed, so the actual overall routing of the pipe, the way that the heads are connected, that should stay the same. And so as we move forward here, now we see this 8 with a circle. And this is another, who knows what that is. So we'll go back to our legend. And if we get in right here, we can see it right in here. I'm not sure if you guys can see this or not. And so we'll see this number 8, and we know that is an adjustable turf spray. So the turf sprays, those are your standard fan pop-up nozzles. They're very, very common in Colorado homes. And so that tells me, okay, so this is a spray zone with all the fixed spray nozzles. This is the body of the sprinkler I need to buy. And then this is the nozzle series I need to get as well. this number associated right here, that is your nozzle number. So the 8 is telling me right here that this is an 8-foot throw. So it's going to throw 8 foot in diameter from head to head. And so we've got a couple different nozzle sizes here. We got some 10s, we got a couple 8s. The darker ring will show basically the direction of the throw. So these are going to throw 360 degrees. These are going to throw 180 degrees. So it's all things like that. They're going to help you read these plans. There's a bunch of other products on here that are pretty important. We talked about the backflow preventer. Again, just let a professional do it. It's not worth trying to do yourself unless you're a licensed plumber. A couple of the other things that I would like to bring up, we have a master valve and a flow sensor called out on these plans. And these are two really cool products that talk to each other and are a really, really big opportunity for water savings, especially if you're on a bigger lot. On smaller lots, they're a little less relevant, but they still play a nice role. But on these bigger lots, the way this works, this flow sensor is basically a water meter. And what it does is it records the flow, any active flow. So if you've got a sprinkler zone running, say it's running 5 gallons a minute, this thing's going to be telling your controller, hey, we've got water going right now. We got 5 minutes or 5 gallons a minute running. And the master valve is going to say, okay, this is expected flow. I'm scheduled to run. I'm going to stay open and I'm going to let the water pass through. Now, all of a sudden, maybe your husband's digging in the yard and he breaks a line and now there's water everywhere. Now you're running 20 gallons a minute. And that's a lot of water. This flow sensor is going to tell the clock, hey, something's wrong. We're using 4 times the water we should be using. The clock's going to be like, okay, noted. It's going to call the master valve. The master valve's going to shut down. So basically any unexpected high flows, the master valve will be able to shut that down. The flow sensor, it's not only really good for what I just described, but it's also really good for just recording your water usage for just your irrigation. I know a lot of you will just look at your water bills and kind of compare it to what your usage is in the winter, but this will give you a perfect identified difference in your outdoor versus your indoor water use. We do call quick couplers out. These are really cool if you want to ever have water access somewhere else in your yard that's not your hose bib. This is, if you want to think about it, this is like a hose bib in the ground, basically. And you put them in a little box with a lid connecting to your main line, and wherever your main line's running, you can pop one of these things in the ground during an installation, and you can hook up a hose. So if you've got a really deep backyard and maybe you want to hand water some stuff in the back, and you've got your main line back there, go install a quick coupler and then you'll have access there as long as your system is pressurized. On smaller systems, this is actually an opportunity to save a little bit of cost. You don't necessarily need them if your hose from your house can reach everywhere in your yard, you don't really need one of these. We do call for isolation gate valves as well. This is basically a way to shut down sections of your system. So if you have a larger system that might, so say you've got a big line right here, and then say it does a T, and you've got sprinklers over here and some over here, you can isolate a leg like so, in case, say, this head is leaking. You can isolate that leg, and while you're fixing that, you can still irrigate here on the right. So this is especially good for larger zones or larger systems where you can't necessarily afford the downtime. Maybe you're establishing some new plants on one side of the yard, and then the other yard, you have to make a repair. So this adds a little bit of flexibility when it comes to maintenance. And I personally put them on all of my systems. Again, smaller systems might not be necessary, but if you have a larger lot, highly recommend them. The turf valve assembly and the drift valve assembly, this is just what allows water into your sprinklers, really. This is the last line of defense before it starts coming out of your heads. These are the products we have to use. Again, we're going with the Rainbird valves. They're tested, tried and true, and the service is very easy on them. They're very operator friendly, and they can handle low flows. So we really like to use those a lot. We kind of get into a couple different nozzles. We do use different heads for different types of plant material. So for some of the smaller native areas that are going to be grown at a higher height, we like to use the 12-inch sprays so that they can get over and mimic precipitation a little bit better. And then we'll use the shorter, smaller 6 or 4-inch heads for some of the shorter, well-kept, grass or turf areas. They're just a little bit cheaper than the 12-inch, so we like to use those wherever we can. This is another place where we can see some of the piping material. So kind of going back to the sleeving, which we talked about, your PVC mainline and your laterals. When it comes to residential stuff, it's almost always class 200. This is very standard stuff. You can get this at Home Depot. And it's very easy to assemble. You watch a quick YouTube video on how to solvent weld and you're there. And the only different pipe here is we do call it this UV resistant polyethylene tubing, and many of you would actually recognize this pipe. It's about 3/4 inch in diameter, it's black, and it's a little flexible. It's kind of like a hose almost. And the reason we use this is we can directly install emitters into the wall of this pipe. So that's why we use that, but we're going to be using PVC for just about everything else. Down here, we have our valve call out. So this kind of shows us, I'm going to scoot over so we can get an example here. This will show us, gotta find one. Yeah, here we go. So this is going to be talking about what this thing is right here. So when we look at this, we see, okay, I'm just seeing like letters and numbers, might not make any sense. A5, this is going to tell me that we are on controller A. And for some of you with larger lots, you might have 2 controllers. But for the most part, most people are going to have 1. So we're going to call the first controller A. So this is saying this is on controller A. We're on zone 5. So this valve right here, this drip valve feeds zone 5 as it's programmed into the controller. And it's going to be irrigating shrubs. So the S is for shrubs. The T is for turf or trees, depending on your designer. And there's a couple of other acronyms depending on who you're working with. And then this right here is going to tell you the size of the valve. So for bigger zones, we're going to need bigger valves. For the most part, if we're staying within 15 to 20 gallons a minute, which most of you will be at a residential level, a 1 inch is going to be sufficient. And then this is actually going to talk about the style of irrigation. So this is saying this is drip. And that's what that DR means. And a couple other notes with emitters. I'll go to this detail here in a second, but this is just telling us, a lot of people they'll have drip installed, but they don't know, how many emitters do I put on my tree? And then I've got this shrub or, whatever it might be on the same zone, and, it doesn't need the same amount of water. How do I know how many emitters to install on all these plants? This is a good starting point to tell you kind of how do I install these emitters, what's the quantity that I need, and what's the volume that each emitter needs to emit in order for me to have successful plant material. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about this at a detail. And then these are some notes right here referring to that detail on how to install it, how to make sure things aren't, you don't have super long runs of that black spaghetti pipe running around everywhere, and make sure that that zone is still successful. So as Lindsay's talking about her plans, these plans are also scaled. So if you wanted to print a construction set for a contractor, it would need to be printed on a 24 by 36, and they would be able to work with that. The PDFs are also scaled. So if you just wanted to email them to them, you could do that as well. So moving on, we have our details. And if you are a DIYer, this is going to be how you actually do everything. So I'm going to take I will take this gate valve, or actually, no, I'm gonna take a sprinkler head for an example right here. So if you are ever wondering, you're like, I know what sprinklers look like when they're running and installed on the ground, but I don't know what it takes to actually put one in the ground. I don't know what it takes to dig it up, buy the fittings, I don't know what fittings I need, I don't know how to do any of this. This is your resource to do that. And for every piece of equipment that's been identified on these plans, there is a detail associated with that as well. And that's going to be at the end of the irrigation plans. It'll tell you everything that you need. So looking at a spray head, I see this right here. So this is obviously my spray body right there in the middle. And we have our finish grade, and we have a little bit of grass. Maybe we have a curb, maybe we have a driveway. We do recommend that heads get installed at about anywhere from 4 to 6 inches off of the curb, especially in turf areas. The reason being is when people run edgers, they will chew these heads up. And I've seen it happen 100 times. So we really recommend keeping them a little bit off. This grass is not going to die. That 6 inches of grass, it is not going to die. It's never been a concern. I wouldn't worry about it. So I personally spec about 4 inches, but I've seen them at 6 and they've been very successful. So with that being said, moving on, we have a swing joint. So this is going to be called a swing joint assembly. And the reason, and that's this pipe right here. So it ties into the bottom of the sprinkler head, kind of comes out, you got a couple fittings, you got a long piece of pipe, a couple more fittings, and then this is your lateral line here. This is what's being fed from your valve that we were speaking about earlier. And the purpose of this swing joint here is so that there's some movement allowed in this head. So, you know, say somebody runs over it with a lawnmower, it can freely move up and down the ground, or obviously the ground is going to shift over time. You know, when you first install the head, it's not going to stay that way forever. So we really recommend installing swing joints. It just reduces opportunities of failure. We see heads survive a lot longer installed on swing joints. So that's a big important thing. And then something else that's noted, you see this little side inlet on these heads. You see this a lot on the 6 and 12 inch heads. And so probably I think it was like 2021 or 2020, in Colorado law, you have to, it's required that you have to, you can only buy pressure regulated spray bodies. And the reason they do that is because heads that operate at higher pressures mist and wastewater. However, the side inlets, if you connect your spray body or your spray head into the side inlet, you will bypass the pressure regulation and you'll waste a bunch of water. So we always recommend that you install them from the bottom. That's where they were intended to be installed. And that's where we would really encourage you to do that. But so, you know, as for the rest of the details, obviously some of them get a little bit more complex when you get into the valves and the wiring, but I promise you, if you do your reading, you watch some YouTube, you can do it. It's not rocket science. And so we got a couple other details here. This does talk about pipe sleeving, as we did earlier. There's notes on it. There's also this wonderful diagram. Talks about the depth. We talked about that 6-inch buffer off of the curb. This is also a really good detail. This just tells you, you know, how deep do I bury all of my lines? How deep do I bury my main line, and my laterals, my drip, my wires? You know, how does all that work? This is going to be your opportunity to see where everything goes. And then some pipe snaking as well. A lot of the pipe will expand and contract in the ground. So giving it, snaking it in your trench like that gives you a little bit of opportunity to avoid some failure and build in some flexibility. It's, you know, I don't know if any of you have ever installed vinyl flooring, but it's also, if you don't give the gap, it'll buckle and kind of fold up into the middle. This will do the same thing. And then here, so these are a lot of our drip details, and this is the good stuff. And this, even if you're just doing stuff at your house and you're just extending a drip line, this is a really good resource where you can figure out how much water you need to give your new plants. So, you know, we had the emitter notes back in the legend. I'm going to go back up to those real quick. Right in here, this will tell you exactly how many emitters to install for what kind of plant, and the volume that those emitters need to be. When we go down here, this is going to tell us how we install those emitters. So when we have a single outlet, this yin yang right here, that's our lateral line. We'll literally just stab the emitter into the side of it, run a black piece of spaghetti, that 1/4 inch drip tubing, really small, and then you can stick it up on a stake and the outlet will just sit right above the ground. If that's not your speed, you can stick these underground too, if you want to hide everything. This is going to kind of talk about the placement of that. You never want to stick it directly on top of the root ball. If you spread them out a little bit, you'll encourage the roots to chase the water and grow outwards as well. And so, you know, typically we encourage people to actually adjust this every couple of years. It never happens, but if you remember it, you should do it because it will encourage your roots to continually grow outwards. This is how to do it with a tree. There's a lot more emitters involved with a tree. And this just kind of talks about the placement with that. Lindsay has a tree planting detail in the landscape plans that I would encourage you to look at if you're planting trees. You know, like we've mentioned before, these plans are they're, you know, obviously geared towards the survivors of the Marshall Fire who are rebuilding, but anybody can get something out of these plans. Even if you're just trying to install some, you know, emitters in a raised planter, you know, you can find that information in here. So this is all really good resource to find all that stuff. And moving on, we are going to talk a little bit about our water use. So with all of this stuff, all of these fancy new plants that claim to be low water, what does that actually look like? You know, why should you consider going with some of these plants? So what we did, we had Norse Design run an exercise with some of the local affected areas out of the Marshall Fire, and took some of their water cost analysis, so what it cost per 7,000 gallons or whatever their intervals are. And we wanted to compare what a theoretical yard would look like water use wise compared to some of the new sustainable landscape templates. And we were able to identify that in a gallons per square foot per season value. So the cool thing about that number is you can look at your yard and be like, okay, I'm using 20 gallons per square foot per year. That's my typical landscape value. Obviously, this is going to be different between everybody's yard, but this is an average standard value that we determined based off of lot typicals within the area. And when we look at the SLTs, you see, oh, I'm down to 9.1 gallons per square foot per season. We're able to cut more than 50% of the water use for some of these templates. And a lot of these plants, the goal with a lot of these plants is just to establish them take the 3 years to establish them and then let them thrive off of natural precipitation. Obviously, having the irrigation in the ground for the years that we experience drought is super important so you don't lose your plant material, because at the end of the day, plants, they need water regardless. You know, whether we can get by on a few years without it because of precipitation, that's great. But at the end of the day, there will probably come a time in the future where there's a drought significant enough that you will need to re-irrigate some of your established native plants. So, but what we really try to demonstrate here is, you know, on a square foot basis, what these cost savings could look like. And so we took, you know, basically these costs from all of these local municipalities, and we wanted to compare what it would cost per season. So here for Louisville, with a standard bluegrass and planting bed irrigated area, you're looking about $308 a season just on irrigation costs. With the sustainable landscape templates, we're looking at $146.75 for the season. So being able to demonstrate the cost value for this has been very, very valuable in helping people kind of look at these templates as a viable option. Sure, you know, it's only $150, right? But that, you know, it hurts when you turn sprinklers on at the beginning of the year. It hurts everybody. It's a lot of money. So this is a really good exercise. Again, all this stuff is on the website. We can talk about all of it. If you guys have questions, we're happy to talk about it. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about here is we do have a opinion of probable material cost. And I would like to emphasize the wording on that. This is the opinion of what we would anticipate materials would cost in December of 2023. That's when we finish this exercise. None of this includes labor. This is strictly material cost at the time that this was performed. And this is geared towards the DIYers. So this is geared towards the people who they want to do it all themselves. You know, maybe they're just doing part of their yard, maybe doing the whole thing, and they want to do a landscaping themselves. This is the resource that you can use to determine what it's going to cost. And I mean, this was only 4 or 5 months ago. So this stuff is definitely not irrelevant. It's still very valid. Obviously, prices are going to change depending on where you go. But these are kind of, you know, cost averages that we were seeing across the industry in Northern Colorado. And so we have all these broken down kind of by the description that they're in. So we have our planting material here. We'll talk about different trees and shrubs based on their size. Lindsay touched on this earlier. If you want to save costs, buy smaller plants. Small plants are better because they're cheaper. They establish quicker. If you just have a little bit of patience, a little bit less water, you're going to be very successful with small plants. So highly recommend looking at smaller pot sizes if you want to save some money. That's probably going to be your best opportunity. Obviously, that just kind of goes for, you know, some of these ornamental grasses and perennials and shrubs and all that kind of stuff. Your ground covers, like your grasses, like your native grasses and your turf grasses, it kind of is what it is. So we do have different types of turf grass that we talked about. We talked about dog tuff, Tahoma 31. That's another big Bermuda grass that we're really excited about. It's a nice warm season grass. And then obviously, if you just want to put some bluegrass in, it's okay. Put some bluegrass in, just make sure it's a functional space to do so. Buffalo Blue Grama, that is a native blend that we have included on some of the larger sites. And, after a couple years of establishment, it is such a great option for large spaces that you don't necessarily want to irrigate all the time. Here we have materials and paving. So this is the hardscape stuff. Maybe you looked at the plans and you're like, oh, I really like that patio. I really just want to do the patio. I don't care about any of the plants, any of that stuff. I just want to do the patio. This is where you're going to get some cost per square foot on what some of those materials might cost. And then the details to install that stuff, a lot of times you will find in the landscape plan as well. And you'll see some other stuff like rock mulch, metal edgers, edging, and other kinds of things. And then here we have some landscape features. So this is just like the pergola and a rain barrel. What it might cost for a retaining wall to buy all the materials for that kind of stuff. And then we'll get into irrigation as well. So this is typically on a zone by zone basis. So if you're able to identify that your house needs 10 zones, you can go in here. Okay, I need my, I've got 10 turf overhead irrigation zones, and I can, find out that that's going to be, $1,000 a pop, and going to be about $10,000, which is fairly industry standard for a contractor too. So this is just kind of a really good place to start when you're in your budgeting phase. And then the last thing that's really nice about these is we wanted to put in a square footage per price. So all of these products, the whole point is that you can look at it and fit it into your space. And that's the goal with this as well. So you can be like, oh, well, maybe I've got a 40,000 square foot lot. Well, you can take that, multiply it by $13.09, say you're doing the same thing, and it'll get you in the neighborhood of at least where to start with your material. And then here, just a couple of notes here, just about, just different cost thoughts here as well. And yeah, that's kind of it for my part here. Again, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm happy to get to them in a second. But I think we've got one more section. Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I just wanted to very briefly just talk about the maintenance manual. And then actually I had one other note that I wanted to talk about if folks are wanting to sort of modify the plans. I just wanted to briefly touch on that. So I'll go ahead and share my screen again. I forgot to unshare last time, but I won't do that this time. So let's see here. Okay. Okay. So this is actually the website for the Sonoma Marin, which is what our project is based off of. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of tools that they have that we have not been able to replicate just yet. And so the first one is I wanted to mention if you wanted to modify these plans. So like I said, they just did the front yard. And so here we have, you can see the front yard plan. And then there's a modification on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can see that this person's yard is a little bit different than the design that they had chosen. And they, likely what they did. So this guide that's on theirs would kind of go into some more detail on how to do that. And again, if you contact me, I can give you some tips on that too. I think their method is a little bit different than how I would do it. But if you get some grid paper and an architectural ruler, then you are definitely able to sort of measure your own site and make the adjustments needed so that you can kind of make one of these plans tailored to your yard. And so then if we scroll down again, you can see they, didn't want that path. They took that path out, added some plantings. They added some plantings at the corner of the yard. Their yard is shaped differently, so they had to move the tree. So there's a number of modifications that were made to this plan to suit this site. So I wanted to let you know that that is an option for you as well. I'm happy to give you some tips on how you can do that with your own yard. And then also, so we'll go back here. We have a maintenance manual that's nearly done, but it's not completely done yet. So I'm not able to share it with you quite yet. But it is largely based again off of the Sonoma Marin Maintenance Manual. They have a lot. Theirs is very beautiful and has a lot of great information. Of course, it's not the same region, so it won't be word for word applicable to our region, but a lot of the stuff, obviously these images are from the Sonoma Marin templates, but just some of the general points and tips on planting, pruning, all kinds of stuff is going to be similar to our region. So, but our updated version will be out very soon, and we'll add that to the list of resources for you guys to the website. So that's all I have.
Thank you both so much. This was fantastic. It's incredible how comprehensive all of this is. Just a couple last minute questions, and we also have one more poll, so I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And just a couple questions. Spencer, do you offer, you kind of mentioned a little bit about the different zones, but do you offer guidance to split irrigation zones?
So I personally do not, but my best advice to you is if you're splitting irrigation zones, if you're handy enough to install a new valve, as long as you're splitting your flow, you're not going to have any problems. It's when you are combining zones it's typically an issue. So my recommendation is that when you split your zones, make sure that your new zones have shared watering requirements. That's why we don't want to see turf and shrubs on the same zone, for example. So when you split your zones, make sure that you're splitting them based off of your watering requirement. Maybe it's your sun exposure, your different hydro zones, whatever it might be. And make sure you have wires in the ground before you get started. That's always a fun thing to find out after the fact. And if you have a hard time, it's okay to call a contractor. Installing a new valve, probably a couple $100.
All right, awesome. And it sounds like you'll have the resources soon, Lindsay. But just wondering if there is going to be any information about where to buy plants and kind of where to source some of these materials.
Yeah, I think we try not to get into necessarily like recommendations in terms of, but I could definitely again, if you email me, I'm happy to provide a list of wholesalers or garden centers that I think might have a lot of these plants. Wholesalers are, you're probably going to get your best price if you can work with a contractor and they can wholesale plants for you. But of course, getting plants at local nurseries and stuff like that too. Local nurseries, I would definitely suggest over your big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that. Your local nurseries are going to be a much better bet in getting a lot of these plants. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. And an effort to stay on time. I think we'll go ahead and end it, but I do want to point out the results of the poll here. So 43% are very likely to use some portion of the templates, and 47% somewhat likely. So very exciting. And let's see, I also just wanted to put one more plug for Garden in a Box. The Garden Golden Hour that was designed in collaboration with Northern Water is still available on our website, and it's absolutely beautiful. It has big blocks of color. So go ahead and check that out. I also wanted to point out on Thursday, we'll be having a webinar that's more of a Q&A with our Master Gardeners. It's the Master Gardener Spring Prep Session. Same time, 6:30. So a great time to go ahead and get some of those questions about your spring gardening. And one more thing, when you exit the webinar tonight, you'll see a survey link pop up. If you have a moment to fill that out, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Otherwise, keep an eye out tomorrow for an email from us. We'll have some follow-up resources and another link to the survey as well. And we'd love your feedback. It definitely helps us tune these to meet the needs of our community. So thank you again, Lindsay and Spencer. This was awesome. And big thanks to Northern Water. And I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.